Glenn had lived in the small duplex on Willow Street for almost a year now. His unit was 3B, second floor, facing the street, right across from 3A, Angela's apartment. He knew her name only from the delicate golden letters etched into her mailbox. Angela. It fit her. Light, graceful, a little mysterious. She moved in 3 months after Glenn, dragging 2 worn suitcases and a dying potted fern up the stairs on a rainy Thursday. Glenn had watched from his window, pretending to be deeply interested in the crack in his blinds. They'd never spoken. Not really. Once, she had smiled at him in the stairwell when he held the door open. Another time, she nodded slightly as they both waited for their mail. But mostly, she came and went like a quiet melody, barefoot on weekends, headphones on, sometimes humming, sometimes laughing on the phone. Glenn fell in love with her in the kind of quiet way that crept into his bones, unannounced, unnoticed, until one day he realized he was looking for her in every footstep on the stairs. He didn't know what she did for a living, or what music she liked, or if she even had a boyfriend. But he wanted to make her smile. So on the first day of spring, he bought a small bouquet of daisies, cheerful and simple. He waited until midnight, then tiptoed across the hall and gently laid them at her door, tied with a ribbon and a tiny note that said only, "For you. G." The next morning, he waited behind his peephole like a nervous teenager. She opened the door in her pajamas, hair messy, eyes sleepy. She blinked at the flowers. Bent down. Picked them up. Then she smiled, that real, warm kind of smile that made Glenn's heart ache in the best way. It became a ritual. On rainy days, he left yellow tulips. On her birthday, he guessed it from the card someone had slipped under her door, he left sunflowers with a tiny cupcake in a pink box. On Valentine's Day, a single red rose and a small origami heart. Angela never once acknowledged the gifts publicly. But Glenn could hear her footsteps linger at the door every morning. And sometimes, she hummed as she walked away, something light and sweet. Glenn had overheard her telling a neighbor once, in the parking lot, that she was addicted to brown sugar boba milk tea. He had memorized the name of the drink like a sacred code. So one evening in early June, as the heat softened into a golden dusk, Glenn placed the drink carefully on her welcome mat. He had added a little post-it note, "Hope today was sweet. G." But as he turned to sneak back across the hall, the door opened. And there she was. Barefoot. Wide-eyed. Holding the note in one hand. Glenn froze, halfway in retreat, like a deer caught between desire and panic. "You're G," she said. He nodded, then winced. Yes?" She looked at the tea. Then at him. Then smiled, that same warm smile from 3 months ago. "You've been the one leaving the flowers?" "Yes." There was a long pause. Glenn braced himself for awkwardness, or maybe even irritation. But instead, she held up the tea like a toast. "Well, this is incredibly sweet. You know that, right?" Glenn let out a laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "I hoped it wasn't creepy." "It could have been," she teased. "But it wasn't. Because you weren't." And just like that, the door between them opened, not just literally. They started texting. At first, it was simple, "Angela, the roses today were beautiful." "Glenn, I'm glad you liked them. They reminded me of you." "Angela, red and dramatic?" "Glenn, more like elegant and soft." They talked more, about movies, books, the worst dates they'd had, their favorite ice cream flavors. Glenn learned she was a freelance graphic designer. Angela found out he worked from home as a software developer. They went for coffee. Then pizza. On their third outing, they saw a late-night showing of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Angela cried. Glenn offered her his sleeve. She took it. They started calling them dates after that. By midsummer, Glenn could no longer imagine a world where Angela wasn't part of it. They spent lazy Sundays lying on picnic blankets in the park, talking about stars and dreams and fears. Angela would sometimes sketch him when he wasn't looking. Glenn, shy but proud, hung her doodles on his fridge. She kissed him for the first time on her balcony under the July moon, after he read her a poem he wrote. He had never shown anyone his poems before. She whispered afterward, "You're kind of amazing, you know that?" He whispered back, "You make it easy." But it wasn't always perfect. There were small misunderstandings, like the time Angela thought Glenn had forgotten their 1-month anniversary. He hadn't. He was just waiting till midnight to surprise her with a candlelit dinner in the stairwell. They laughed about it later. Once, Glenn panicked when she didn't reply for 2 days, only to find out she had dropped her phone in the bath. They learned to grow through the messiness, not around it. On their 6-month mark, Angela gave him a small notebook. On the first page, she had drawn a single daisy. Underneath, she had written, "The first flower you gave me, and the last day I didn't know your name." Glenn smiled, then turned to the next page. More sketches. More memories. The tea. The movie. his old hoodie she wore when she was cold. Each page was a chapter of their love, drawn in soft lines and colored in joy. One winter evening, almost a year after the first bouquet, Glenn stood again in front of her door. This time, not with flowers, but with a small box. Inside was a silver pendant, shaped like a daisy. When she opened the door, he didn't need to say anything. She knew. And she said yes, not just to the necklace, not even to a question, but to them. They still lived in the same building, 3A and 3B. But now, the hallway was just the space between kisses, between laughter, between a love that began with flowers and bloomed into something endless.